Welcome. Today, we're zooming way past the match scores and the penalty shootouts. In this explainer, we're going to explore the colorful, cultural, and deeply physical fabric of the world's biggest sporting event, the FIFA World Cup. We'll be unpacking the rich history, the iconic objects, and the absolute legends that have turned this tournament into a total global obsession. Okay, so what do a stolen golden goddess, a jalapeno sporting a mustache, and a brutal 15-day boat ride all have in common? Sounds like the start of a weird joke, right? But I promise you, by the end of this explainer, you're going to understand exactly how these bizarre oddities brilliantly shaped football history. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to cover Jules Rimet's grand vision, the wild chase for the ultimate trophy, how the match ball evolved, mascots as cultural symbols, and wrap it all up with the icons themselves, Pelé and Maradona.
First up, Jules Rimet's grand vision, the inception.
So, the whole tournament started with FIFA president Jules Rimet. He had this massive dream of a global championship, but pulling it off? Definitely not easy. I mean, think about the absolute luxury of modern players flying on private jets today. Now compare that to 1930. Rimet, the shiny new trophy, and the European teams had to endure a grueling 15-day boat ride across the Atlantic Ocean on the SS Conti Verde just to get to the first ever tournament in Uruguay.
And if you want to know just how crazy different preparation was a century ago, listen to this quote from French player Lucien Laurent. He said, "We did our basic exercises down below and our training on deck. The coach never spoke about tactics at all. Literally just working out on a boat deck, it was such an incredibly informal start to what is now the absolute pinnacle of global sports."
Moving on to Section 2, chasing the ultimate trophy, the ultimate prize.
Let's actually look at the hardware these players bleed for, because the history here is basically a movie. There's a stark difference between the two main prizes. The original Jules Rimet trophy was this gold-plated silver sculpt of Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. But compare that to the current FIFA World Cup trophy we've had since 1974. This one is 18-karat hollow gold. And it has to be hollow, by the way, because if it were solid gold, it would weigh like 80 kilograms. Nobody's lifting that. It depicts two human figures holding up the earth, and today it's kept super safe under lock and key in Zurich. But notice how I said the current one is kept safely? Yeah, that's because the original Jules Rimet trophy had the most ridiculous run imaginable. During World War II, an Italian FIFA vice president named Ottorino Barassi literally hid the thing in a shoebox under his bed so the Nazis wouldn't confiscate it. Then, right before the 1966 tournament in England, it was stolen, only to be famously sniffed out under a bush by a dog named Pickles. You can't make this stuff up. But tragically, after Brazil won the trophy outright in 1970, it was stolen again in 1983 in Brazil, and it's never been recovered. Just vanished. Today, only its original base survives in a museum.
All right, Section 3, evolution of the match ball, the tool of the trade. So switching gears from the prize to the actual equipment, the ball itself tells this unbelievable story of tech evolution, and honestly, some absolute absurdity. Take the very first final in 1930. The two teams, Argentina and Uruguay, literally could not agree on which ball to use. So they compromised. Argentina used their ball, the Tiento, for the first half and went up 2-1. But for the second half, they swapped to Uruguay's ball, the T model, which was noticeably larger and heavier. The momentum completely flipped, and Uruguay ended up winning 4-2. Wild, right?
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds over the decades. We start out with those heavy leather balls with the thick laces back in 1930, then jump to 1970 with the iconic Adidas Telstar. That was the very first 32-panel black and white ball, specifically designed so people could easily see it on their black and white TVs at home. Fast forward to 1986, the Azteca drops as the first fully synthetic ball, and then bam, 2022. The Al Rahla ball uses sustainable water-based glues and actually has connected tech inside it for precise real-time data tracking. Just a massive, massive leap in engineering.
Now for Section 4, mascots, the colorful cultural symbols.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how host nations chose to visually represent themselves to the world. It is such a bizarre, rapid evolution. Things started off pretty traditional in 1966 with England's Willie, a lion wearing a Union Jack kit. Makes sense. But by Spain, 1982, we're ditching animals entirely for a piece of fruit, naranjito de orange. Mexico, 86, gives us piqué, a spicy jalapeno pepper with a mustache. And then Italy 1990 completely throws out the rulebook with Chow, literally a stick figure made out of geometric blocks with a football for a head.
And from there, the mascots just get more commercialized and wildly imaginative. In '94, the US brings in Warner Brothers to design Striker, the dog. France '98 gives us Futix, the rooster, leaning heavily into local tradition and comic culture. By 2002, Korea and Japan went totally digital with Otto, Kaz, and Nick, these computer-generated guys from a made-up sport called Atmoball. And then, Russia 2018. They presented Zabivaka the wolf. The absolute best part? He wore sports glasses that the designer claimed gave him special powers to protect his eyes while running fast on the pitch. I absolutely love those bizarre little details.
Finally, Section 5, Icons, Pele and Maradona. So the trophies, the tech, the mascots, they're all incredible, sure, but it's the human legends who immortalize them. Just look at this single number, 3. That digit is the absolute unmatched pinnacle of World Cup success, because only one man in the entire history of the sport has won the tournament 3 times. And that is Pele, lifting the trophy for Brazil in 1958, 1962, and 1970. And that legendary run truly kicked off in Sweden back in 1958. Pele was just a 17-year-old kid, a total prodigy. He actually started the tournament sitting on the bench, but once he stepped onto that pitch, it was just an explosion of talent. He drops a hat trick in the semi-final against France, and then in the final against the host nation, he scores twice. One of those was this stunning goal where he cheekily chipped a defender and just volleyed it right in. In that moment, he single-handedly solidified Brazil as the ultimate footballing powerhouse right then and there.
Now, let's pivot to another completely staggering number, 53. During the 1986 tournament in Mexico, Argentina's Diego Maradona endured a record 53 fouls. Let that sink in. That is 20 more fouls than any other player has ever suffered in a single edition of the tournament.
So, the crucial point here is that Maradona's '86 run was this ultimate masterclass of sheer, gritty endurance combined with unbelievable skill. Unfazed by the sweltering heat and getting hacked down 53 times, he was literally unstoppable. Against England, he scores the hugely controversial Hand of God goal and then immediately follows it up with a legendary goal of the century, just weaving past half the English squad. And in the final, even while being heavily marked by West Germany, he manages to provide the decisive trophy-clinching assist. It was basically a one-man triumph for the ages.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this. We've seen how the tournament evolved from a miserable 15-day boat ride in 1930 to microchip-connected soccer balls in 2022. We went from a stolen golden goddess to a multi-million-dollar masterpiece, and we've witnessed the absolute magic of players like Pele and Maradona. So, looking ahead to the massive expanded tournament coming to Canada, Mexico, and the US, what new legends, bizarre mascots, or groundbreaking tech will the 2026 World Cup bring to the table? Thanks so much for hanging out with me to explore this rich, fascinating history, and keep your eyes peeled for the history that's yet to be written.